well-fed. Presenters Anya and Arthur Gordon and Bonnie Leach will talk about their urban agriculture venture, the Well-Fed Community Garden. It was founded in 2012 to grow produce for the Irregardless Cafe. And I think we've all enjoyed many a wonderful meal, by the way, at the Irregardless. Anya and Arthur are the majority owners of the property, with 4 other couples who are all members of Beth Meyer Synagogue. And if I understand correctly, Bonnie, I think you're one of the 4 couples?
Still TBD.
Still TBD, okay. But with the sale of the restaurant at the end of 2019, Anya and Arthur are exploring new directions with their urban agriculture venture may take. Guided by the Jewish environmental movement, and I think somewhere I saw a link also to something called Jewish community farming. If after this somebody wants to, I think that is a correct link. But guided by the Jewish environmental movement, the Well-Fed Community Garden may develop into a living Jewish farm, making practices that are thousands of years old relevant for today. These practices inform how we grow produce, share belongings, treat neighbors, observe the passing of time, celebrate and improve and care for plants and animals, and create a vibrant, welcoming community for all folks, regardless of race, faith, or sexual orientation. Quite an undertaking, if I might add. Jewish community farming, which I think is the link that I was given earlier, is an effective and growing trend in North America. In a recent post, the new CEO of Hazon, Jakir Manella, wrote that, quote, the Jewish environmental movement is clearly one of the strongest, most vibrant streams in Jewish life in North America today. Today, we're sharing with Anya and Arthur their vision of nourishing our community by transitioning the Well-Fed Community Garden on Athens Drive into a place where we can all cultivate community, promote environmental sustainability and food justice, foster opportunities for meaningful spiritual engagement and personal growth, and strengthen Jewish life. So with that, I turn it over to Anya. I might ask though, Anya, should people post questions in the chat, or can we interrupt as you go, or would you prefer we hold questions to the end? Do you have any thoughts there?
Why don't we post into the chat and wait to the end, because we'll probably be answering some of the questions in our presentation.
Okay.
And also Bonnie's going to start out. Bonnie's been helping us with the planning of events at the Well-Fed Garden, and she's an important part of our beginning efforts. So okay. I'll let Bonnie begin, please.
Then I'll monitor the chat and we'll bring it all back together at the end.
Great, thank you. All right, let's get right into it. Can everybody see this okay? Is it full screen? Thumbs up, yes, good?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
Great. So thanks. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bonnie Leach. Thank you for joining today. As Anya had mentioned, I've been working on events and a bunch of other kind of overseeing how we can kind of take this garden to the next step. But before we can kind of set any course for the future, it's really important to understand what's going on now in the present and how we got here. So we're going to need to back up even further to get started on that. So let me advance the slide. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to go back to the beginning. What is Jewish farming all about? Then we're going to talk about what's happening today with the Jewish environmental movement, as Sid had mentioned. Then we're going to talk about the specifics of the Well-Fed Garden, and then moving ahead, what things will look like in the programming for years to come. All right, so I love that we're talking about this here today on the first day of spring. So let's jump right into what is like Jewish farming. right? So if you stop and think for a moment, so much of our Jewish religion is attached and anchored in agriculture, right? So recently we celebrated Tu B'Shvat. This is all about the trees. We acknowledge the 7 species that are mentioned so frequently in the Bible. People know what those are. We've got wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. You see those come up over and over again. We recognize the holiday of Sukkot in the fall for the harvest. We continue to build a sukkah. When we think about what it was like for these farmers when it was harvest time and they really needed to fully immerse themselves physically, go into the field in order to take care of all the farming that was required at that time. We have an entire section of the Talmud, which is comprised of 11 separate tractates, which is entirely about farming and all the agricultural laws. So the name of this section of the Talmud is actually called Seder Zeraim, which literally means the seeds. And now remember, the Talmud is the rabbinic interpretations of the Torah. And here in Seder Zeraim, it provides very specific instructions about agriculture and how to do farming in a Jewish manner. Some of these you might be familiar with. This is where this Talmud talks about how we leave the corners of our field unharvested so we can provide for the poor. This is where it talks about prohibiting us from mixing multiple types of seeds in the same field. We specify the details on tithing to the Kohanim, the high priests, from what we harvest. It gives us the specific directions. You should not eat fruit from trees that are younger than 3 years old. This is also where it talks about the Shemitah, the every 7th year when we let the land lie fallow, good stewardship here. So while it's the Jewish law that tells us how to farm, you can also kind of think of it in the reverse order, that the farm itself is a canvas for Jewish learning, Jewish ideology, and really these green values. So this is a nice little graphic, which, as Sid had mentioned before, this comes right off the jewishcommunityfarming.org website. And you can see how we've really tied in these concepts, which are familiar to us as Jews. And then when you take a step back, this is really very central to sustainable farming in general. So I'm not going to read through each one, but as you read across the list, this is not only Jewish, these are not only Jewish values, but these are really good stewardship values and really good community building values just in general. Of course, we need to share with those who are less fortunate for us. We want to come together as community. We are connected to our earth, et cetera, et cetera. Oops. I skipped right over. So clearly we've been talking about farming and agricultural maintenance since biblical times, as I just mentioned here. But Jews have been applying these same religious laws to farming here in America for a very, very long time. And I get it. Most people are not accustomed to seeing the words Jews and agriculture together in the same sentence. We tend to think of Jews as being the merchants living in places like New York City, right? But I don't know if anybody on the call here is familiar with the name Baron de Hirsch. He was a huge philanthropist in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he established the Baron de Hirsch Fund to assist with the settlement of Eastern European Jews as they came to this country. This was in 1891, really a trade school to help them get started. And the Jewish Agricultural Society was a subsidiary of this fund. It was created in 1900. This is over 120 years ago. And I don't know if folks from the Northeast might be familiar with one of its many projects. This was the agricultural school in Woodbine, New Jersey. So this Jewish Agricultural Society, they had a monthly publication. You can see an image of this on the left. It was printed in both English and Yiddish. And for those who speak Yiddish, I'm actually studying some now. You can see the title of this is Der Yiddischer Farmer. So this is what was out on a monthly basis to make sure that even in the New World, we could definitely cater to the Eastern European Jews who are coming over here and serving as farmers. The farmers themselves, excuse me, they assembled into a federation. And by 1908, they had a great enough membership, they actually had their first convention of Jewish farmers. Where was that held? In New York City, of course. So before I turn this over to Anya and Arthur to talk about the Jewish environmental movement as it's continuing in North America, I just want you to keep in mind as she talks that this is not new for us Jews here in America. You might think it's a new movement that's coming up, but really it's a revival of what's been here for quite a while already. So I'm gonna turn that over now and kind of segue so people have a good understanding now of what's inherently biblical about Jewish farming and to understand that it really has been here and taking place for quite a long time in America. So Anya, I think you're going to share from your side next. So I will stop sharing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just seeing the chat now that I stopped sharing. That's great, Sharon. So you do the temple to Hirsch.
Okay. Let's see, am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay, great. Excellent. So is the screen shared now? Do you see this Jewish environmental movement? No?
Yes,
Yeah.
I see it.
You do? Okay, great.
You can make it full slideshow, but I think it's fine as is
Okay, slideshow. Okay, start.
from current slide.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is that it?
Yep, much better.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bonnie. That was very informative. And if I may comment from what I understand, certainly the agriculture at the beginning of the last century that was in America was motivated by a completely different reason, because the Jews were recent immigrants. They needed to find employment and sustenance. And there were a lot of farmers, Jews that became farmers. And I know that some of the ancestors of members of Beth Meyer were in the chicken egg business, and that was a common one. And of course, we all know that over there in Europe, before our ancestors emigrated here, they weren't allowed to own land. They weren't allowed to do agriculture. And so that wasn't a traditional Jewish activity. However, when the Zionist movement began and the reclamation of Israel began, then there was this huge movement to agriculture, and we're all very proud of the kibbutz movement. So how do I go to the next slide this way?
Just click.
Oh, good. So what is this working? The Jewish environmental movement that I'm going to start talking about is something that I think began in the 80s and 90s. And I'm pretty sure that Arthur Wasco with eco kosher or eco Judaism was one of the founders of it. And this movement is speaking to the current generation of Jews or of younger Jewish people, because of course we all know that the issue of continuity and that our children and grandchildren are no longer affiliating with Jewish institutions in the same way that we and our parents have. So there's the effort to make the Jewish path an attractive and relevant path to the current generation. And it's mostly being led by the organization Hazon. However, there's dozens of organizations have sprung up in the last few decades that have helped spark this transformative movement. And it truly is transformative. So here's a list of some. The bottom one is Shalom Center with Eco-Judaism with Arthur Wasco. And Arthur and I were happy to meet Arthur Wasco at Alat Hayim several times when we used to go there for retreats. The main organization seems to be Hazon, and they have many components. I'll come back to that. But there's other organizations, COJOL, which is part of the Federation movement, the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life. It's connected with the JCRC, which I saw that Bob Goldwasser is on, and he's been very involved in that. So that's part of the Federation movement, and that's been, I think, about 30 or 40 years. Dayenu is a relatively new organization that's fighting climate action. And then there's these other ones. The Jewish Farmers Network is basically just a group of young Jewish farmers who are bounded together. And really, as a community and as members of the American community and the world community, we're all very concerned about the reports of climate change and all the changes that we're seeing in our environment and the threat that it's posing to us. And just as all of us as members of the American community, but many have bound together and are part of the Jewish community fighting climate change. And it's very impressive for me. I've just attended seminars online for them. However, Hazan seems to be the leader. It's 21 years old, and Arthur and I were just lucky enough to meet with the new CEO, Yakir Manella, at Pearlstone, and to learn more about what they are doing. Hazan was founded by a fellow called Nigel Savage, and he was on the Sukkot. Yeah, was it Sukkot? No, it was a Shavuot last year, just last year, the Shavuot program that Rabbi Eric arranged. So they've got all kinds of aspects that they're doing with the Jewish environmental movement. They are part of the Isabel Friedman Center, where they had the first Jewish farm that has trained all these other Jewish farms. Hakel is a Jewish intentional communities incubator in the diaspora. I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds fascinating. Jofi, Jewish outdoor food, farming, and environmental education, is a very powerful and effective movement. The youth climate movement empowers teenagers and young adults. The Hazan Seal of Sustainability is something that they're marketing to all the Jewish institutions, federations, synagogues, that they make their buildings meet the needs of that don't waste energy and are sustainable. And then the Brit Hazan is a personal, they are asking each of us to make this commitment to change and be more environmentally sustainable. So I'm really excited by the leadership that this organization is offering. And our hope is to learn from them and perhaps get some support from them. So over the last 20, 30 years, there are 13 different agricultural institutions across North America that can be called Jewish farms. And they're in more than 13 different locations, because some of them have multiple locations. And we can see it spread all over. And I want to just talk about these different ones here, because each one takes a different form. It's not like there's one type of Jewish farm that everyone's are like them. Each one is different. So the first one, the Abundance Farm in Northampton, Massachusetts, that Arthur and I visited this past summer, it's connected with the synagogue there and the day school, and they even have a food justice outreach where they give away food to underprivileged or underserved people. Coastal Roots is near San Diego in California. It was set up by a foundation, the Leastag Foundation. They serve all communities. It's not just Jewish. However, they do have a Jewish bend. And they have, if you want to check out their website, they have lovely videos telling about it. Grow Torah is in the New York area, and it's associated with schools. So it's sponsored by the Jewish schools there. Pushing the Envelope in Illinois was set up by one family who had some land. So it might be a similar model to what we might do. And they have, let me see, they also appeal to people of all faiths, but it is supports the Jewish life. In many ways, we want to support, we don't want to be singled out like a JCC as just a Jewish farm. But it looks like they just do the fundraising on their own. Urban Adamah in Berkeley is really an exciting model. And one of our partners daughter attended the fellowship there, and they really bring Judaism to life. And after I'm finished this, I'm going to show you a video, just a 4-minute video from their website that gives you a taste of what that's like. And they are an independent organization, and they have their own board of directors, and they fundraise. Adama Hazan is at the Isabella Friedman Center, and that's under the Hazan umbrella. They just recently merged. Eden Village Camp is in 2 locations, in New York and in California, and it's basically a summer camp. However, they do a lot of agricultural work there. So it's an example of it's called a Jewish farm, even though it's basically a summer camp. Milk and Honey Farm in Boulder, Colorado is part of the JCC there. The Shalom Institute Shemesh Farms, that's an organization, an institute, and it's sponsored by that institute. Beantown Jewish Gardens in Boston was founded by community members, but it is supported by the Moshe Kavod House Farm, the Shul team, the Hebrew Union College, and Hazan. So that's an interesting way to see how they are being sponsored. A car in Colorado was started by someone who attended a Hazan food conference, and it's supported by the Denver Academy of Torah and the Rose Community Foundation. And then the Pearlstone Center is where Arthur and I were just last month meeting Yakir Manila, and my goodness, that is an impressive place, and it's part of the Baltimore Jewish Federation. The last one is Hirsch in Toronto. They have 3 sites, and they're sponsored by their own board of directors. Okay, at this point, I want to show you that video. So I'm going to, how do I do that? Can you do that for, no, I guess, can you do that, Bonnie? Put that video on now? Or should I go back to that other screen where I saw you put it? Here it is. Do we just click there and it'll start? Let me see. No.
You need to make sure that you're sharing with the sound on.
But it's not coming on though. Here, let me see if I can get up here. 1 second. But I guess I have to share again. Okay, it's a new share. Is that what it is? A new share. Okay, here it comes.
Just make sure that you're sharing the sound.
Okay. Are you getting sound?
Yes, but we need to see the video.
You're not seeing the
With all
video?
ages, all backgrounds.
We're still seeing the PowerPoint. You could do a share for the YouTube.
Okay, how do I do that?
Do a new share for the YouTube.
Yeah, new share. Okay.
And instead of selecting the PowerPoint, select the YouTube. Yep, there you go. Yep.
I think Urban Adama is having a profound impact. With all ages, all backgrounds, all across the Bay Area, by introducing experiential Jewish education in an inspiring new way.
Redesigning Jewish life is the primary challenge facing the American Jewish community today, and Urban Adama is meeting that challenge. Urban Adama has created an entirely new kind of community center.
A place to get excited about Jewish identity and build community all at the same time.
For us, it's about radically meeting people where they're at, not just Jewishly, but also physically, intellectually, emotionally. We are using the tools of Jewish tradition, as well as mindfulness, farming, and social action, to add depth, meaning, and joy to people's lives.
The fellowship is for people in their 20s who come from all around the country to live with us for 3 months. And they come to slow down and to farm and to explore Judaism. They leave with tools to be agents of change inside and outside of the Jewish world.
I went into the fellowship thinking that I was going in for just the farming. I found the Judaism that I didn't even know that I was looking for.
This experience has made relevant and has made alive a lot of the Judaism that I didn't find accessible before coming here. 90% of what we grow here on the farm is given to folks in our community who don't have access to organic produce. We do that through our weekly free farm stand. It's an event we put on in partnership with several organizations in the community. The foundational ethical principle of our tradition is to care for one another. And every person who participates in programming at Urban Adamah helps make that happen.
Summer campers aren't just here to farm. They're here to experience Jewish life in a whole new way. Well, hamotzi lecha min haaretz, this traditional blessing that we say over bread, it takes on a whole new meaning when you've been harvesting wheat from the farm, threshing, winnowing, grinding, making flour, and sharing this beautiful bread that you've made with other campers at our family Shabbat celebration at the end of the week.
So reflecting on my daughter's experience at Urban Adamah, I just love the earthy, farmy, musical, connected, conscious brand of Judaism that she gets to take part in and put her hands into when she comes here.
Each week during the school year, groups of students come and visit us, and they're here for programs that last from 2 hours to 3 days. They come from all over. They come from as far north as Napa, as far south as Los Gatos, New York, LA, and beyond. And they're all kinds of ages. We have preschoolers here up to college-age students.
Urban Adamah is a cultural and spiritual home for a much larger community. People come to public programs. We run more than 100 each year. Shabbat and Havdalah celebrations, Jewish holiday festivals, lectures, trainings, workshops, speakers, yoga classes for kids, for adults, for really everyone.
I feel really lucky to have found Urban Adamah. I've never really felt at home in a traditional synagogue, and Urban Adamah has really become my synagogue. I've never come here and not felt inspired and connected by the programming.
It's been amazing to feel like I've spent so much time like looking for all these things in my life and find this place that has it all in one place.
Our end game, to build a more loving, just, and sustainable community and a more loving, just, and sustainable world.
Okay. New share. How do I get back to my?
Could raise their hand once again for a quick test, please.
Do a new share and go back to the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so it's new share, and I'm just trying to find it. Sorry about that. Okay, there it is. Let me just pause that. Okay. Can you hear me still? Yes, no? Yeah, okay, great. So
We're still
now,
the YouTube though.
oh, you are, okay, so I have to go new share.
Back to the PowerPoint.
How's that? Is it there? No. No?
You can try to stop share and then start again.
Okay, stop share. Stop video. Okay, I'm gonna go out of it.
Okay, good.
Now
Now
I'm going to go share screen. Okay, and now I'm gonna go to the. Let me get it here. Gosh, I think I deleted it. Okay, I'm gonna have to pull it up. Give me a minute. Well, actually, I can get it. Yeah. In stopping it, I had to delete it. Okay, so let me just look and see where it is. 1 second. Okay, here it is. So I go back to the Zoom and I go to the share screen and I go to this. Did it work? Nope. Let me try again. Okay, share screen. Share. Let's see, where is it here? Here it is. You don't get it, huh? Okay, here, let's try this, Jewish farming. This is the wrong one.
Bonnie, is there a way you can, I don't know what, share with Anya? And
I
Okay,
don't have
why
her
don't you-
latest copy, so no, I don't
Why
have.
don't you just put your one? Oh, hold it, maybe down here, maybe it's, no, it's not here. I'm not that up to date on all of this. Why don't you put yours on and I'll just use yours, okay?
Okay. I don't know that I've got all the edits that you've made, but I will.
Well, I'll just have to make do. Okay, go down to the well-fed garden, yeah. Okay. So you guys can hear us? So as Sid said when he introduced us, Arthur and I bought this property in 2012. And at the time, we grew produce for the well-fed garden. And within a year, actually 5 couples, well, 4 couples and 1 guy joined us and helped pay for it because the land costs a certain amount of money, but actually developing it costs about 4 times what the land cost. And so it's been quite a big investment there. The property is across from Athens Drive High School. It's 1.5 acres. And the 4 couples are members of Beth Meyer Synagogue. And the 5th member is a Jewish man, but he's not part of any synagogue. So shortly after we purchased the property, it was all overgrown with trees and bushes. And there's a house on the property that was not inhabitable. And we were walking around and there was a pile of bricks in the backyard, in amongst the bushes and the trees. And we thought, gosh, I wonder what this is. And it turned out it was a well. It was an old well because that land had been farmed by Black farmers since after the Civil War. And our understanding is that this was their 40 acres and a mule. And when we discovered the well, we had it redug and a modern irrigation system put in. And this well gives the garden its name. And it goes to the biblical metaphor of redigging our Father's well, reconnecting us to the true source of life and to the wellness that the garden is bringing the community. And as many of you may know, Arthur sold a restaurant at the end of 2019. And now we're just wondering what we're going to do with the property. And since we're aware of these Jewish farms across the country, and as I've said, they're all in different forms and different incarnations or iterations, we're exploring whether we might do something like that at the well-fed garden. So I guess you move it forward now. Is that right, Bonnie? Thank you. So as you can see, this is the plan. We hired Will Hooker, who is a professor at NC State, a specialist in permaculture and landscape design. And he designed this property. This here, do you see my, you don't see my pointer, do you? Okay, so this is the plan that he created for us. And over the last 9 years, or almost 10 years now, we bought the property on March 22nd, 2012. So today's 10 years, Arthur. 10 years that we bought it. We bought it on the fly. We thought, hey, why don't we go farming and grow produce for the garden? And then our friend Jill Flink, who was a real estate agent, showed us around. This was the first property. And this property was really blighted. It was full of garbage, but somehow she noticed in the pile of garbage on the floor in the house, there was a stack of papers that said it was about to be foreclosed on the following week. And once things are foreclosed and you can't buy them, they're sort of stuck for 6 months in some kind of banking system. So we had to buy it right then and there. And we decided to buy it. And yeah, so that's that. So let's move on to the next one. So initially we had a wonderful young woman, Jen Sanford Johnson, who was our first farmer. We had to cut down all the trees because it was all overgrown. We built fences, and she was terrific. She made the soil that she could grow food in it. And you can see this is actually a picture from her days on the left of her cultivating the farm. It was full of rocks and roots from all the trees. So she was just terrific. And but when we asked Professor Will Hooker to make the design for us, we wanted to have a place for people to meet and to have agritourism events. And over the years, we've had a number of different agritourism events we've had that were all associated with the restaurant, blackberry festivals. This picture here is from a fundraising dinner we did for a lady who had beehives on the property. And we have monthly workshops in agriculture, art in the garden, drumming in the garden, date nights, all sorts of fun. We've had farm dinners with celebrity chefs. It's a lot of fun. So part of what we did is that we put in a pizza oven that was paid for by one of our partners in their shares of it. And it's a place where people can gather. So you're seeing the lawn part. If you want to go back, could you go back, Bonnie? Oops, yeah. So you can see this is the lawn part. This is the house. The house is the brown sort of rectangular squares there. And the street is on the left side of the screen. That's a street. So the backyard is that sort of kidney-shaped green lawn, and that's where our agritourism events are. That's there, yeah. Thanks a lot. And then you can see there's the fields, and we have the high tunnel now there too. Okay, go ahead. Thank you very much, Bonnie. And we can go further to the next one. So we're growing all sorts of things at the garden now. Well, after our initial farmer, we had, who was Jen, we had Morgan, who was one of her interns, and she had just graduated from NC State, and she was there for 3 years and had a group of apprentices working with her and managing the garden. And when we sold the restaurant, we weren't sure what we were going to do, so we rented the property for 2 years to another urban farmer who specialized in microgreens. And now we've got a real farmer who specializes in growing food in the ground, and she's growing all these things there. So it's a lot of food, and she's going to be selling them at food stands and at the Cary Farmers Market. And I'm not sure if we'll have a relationship with Beth Meyer. We have to see how her crops go. Next, please. Okay, so this is an example of some of the things that we've done at the garden in the past and could continue to do in the future. We're getting a lot of volunteering. Our new farmer is named Lily, and she's had several corporations contact her that the businesses need to have volunteer days, and they're coming out and helping her in the garden. But you can see we've had children's theaters there, and right, Bonnie, that's useful, yes. Half the space, but half the land is for gardening, is for agriculture, and the other half is for events. Okay, next, please. So here we come to the part where Arthur and I might be part of it. Oh yeah, that if we decide to move ahead and make it an event place for all faith traditions. However, the Jews may use it 50% of the time, but it will be open to everyone, as so many of those other Jewish farms that I showed you are. We could have Shabbat dinners there. We could certainly put up a sukkah, Tu B'Shvat celebrations, Passover. We have had Sukkot out there from the Yavna community. We had Lag Bomer from the young Chabad professionals. So these are events that we've already had, but going forward, certainly the religious school classes could come out, youth groups, adults, sisterhoods. We could have all kinds of programming. Our farmer Lily will be doing agricultural educational programming. And like Urban Adamah, if you look at their website, they do lots of private rentals for weddings and things like that too. Pearlstone does too. We were just at Pearlstone, which is the part of the Jewish Federation of Baltimore. Yakir told us that 50% of their rentals are for non-Jewish organizations. And of course, all these things, running an organization like this or having such a farm costs money. We have to hire people. So we have to have income, and that's what private rentals are about. Okay, moving forward. Oh, yes. So Arthur, did you want to say anything about how the well-fed garden will be? And then I'm going to end with doing a small little lesson on agriculture and Judaism.
I didn't know I had a speaking part.
Arthur, go on.
Well, nice to see everybody. My orientation has a strong feeling of intuition involved with it. And that intuition is based on my relationship with the divine. And I find that I notice patterns that come through the gematria and the 2, 3s, 18s. All of those numbers sort of give us clues as to the correct direction to go in. And ever since I walked on the well-fed garden, I've had that intuition that this is the right place and certainly is turning into the right time. And just recently, I was watching Fantastic Fungi, which is a documentary on Netflix. And it talks about how important mushrooms are for just cleaning all the schmutz when things pass and change. But more importantly, it's talking about mycelium. And mycelium is this network that's larger than the internet that holds every living thing together. And because it's happening microscopically and happening so slowly, the human perception is not keeping pace with the development of the planet. And we certainly are having a lot of conflict between should we lower the price of oil at the moment or take care of the planet? And everyone's selfishness is saying they'd rather lower the price of oil than take care of everything else. But with all that said, the thing that's fascinating to me is that nowhere in the Torah is the word Shekinah referred to, which is the feminine aspect of the divine. And yet, every time that the Aleph Tav appears in the Torah, Alpha, Omega, so to speak, it's a reference to the Shekinah. And it's always the preposition before the next object. So the Shekinah literally is the energy and the space between the objects. And we can see this in music. There's 12 notes. When we listen to music, you can go from Frank Zappa to Beethoven. They're all playing the same 12 notes, but yet the space around those notes determines what we perceive as the quality of the music. The same thing is true in art. When you look at a painting on the wall, it's not so much the object that's in the painting, but it's the space between the objects that gives it an affinity to us to see it as art. So the same thing I think is true with the Shekinah, and what we call Mother Earth is really just another name for the Shekinah. And I think in the next few years, the relevance to mushrooms, to the mycelium, to this energy between us is really going to be the healing energy. And we just happened upon it, but yet it's part of the intuitive pathway that is sort of guiding our way through this whole endeavor. So so what we're trying to do is figure out ways to get people on their own to think that they have another good idea and that they should come out and visit the well-fed garden. And then before you know it, you're sort of encapsulated in this mycelium and in this volunteer effort and in a community that, whether it's Jewish or just humanitarian, is the right path. So we're on to something big here, and we certainly need all the support and help that we can get. And we appreciate your interest in what we're doing and look forward to seeing you there as well as around the synagogue.
Thank you, Arthur. So in addition to the shiitake mushrooms growing on the logs, we're growing a lot of organic produce. Before I finish up, we have about 12 minutes. Does anyone have a question? Oh, there are questions in the chat. Okay, let's see. Are there any other questions in the chat? How many acres is the farm? It's 1.55 acres is the land. Okay, that's it. Any other questions that anyone has? Barry?
Yeah, what's the learning curve been like for the two of you? And what I mean by that is, what steps have you taken? What have you learned about what it takes to take a piece of property and I remember seeing the garden when you first bought it, so, and sitting around it and walking through it. So I know it was in need of so many things. I mean, power lines overhead, trees that were out of control, large trees, underbrush, land that had been standing fallow, I guess it is, or hadn't been used and just was unkept, and house, as you mentioned, was dreadful shape. So the question is, what other than that and bringing it up, what's the curve been like? What have you evolved from to?
Well,
like, what would you advise
so
somebody who's doing it?
Right. It's so good to be connected to the land. It's a big education connected to the cycles of nature. First of all, for me, just discovering that well on the garden, if we had, we bought the land without thinking about where we were going to get the water to water the garden, the food. And we all know that city water costs a fortune. We water our lawn in the summer and our bill goes way up. We were a bunch of kids, silly. And we almost feel like we were directed by an invisible hand of the Shekhinah or something like that there was a well. And of course, we invested in rebuilding and redigging it. It was 150 feet deep and we made it 280. And then we put in the whole irrigation system. But it's just humbling, and seeing the seeds, putting it in the soil. It's not easy growing food. There's pests, there's storms. It's a humbling experience. And really, in a way, our sophisticated society has disconnected us from the realities of nature and the messages that it gives us. And it helps me understand myself, honestly. I of course, we can say a lot more, but anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask?
Yeah, I have a question of, is there either a website or, is there regular, I'll say, scheduled programming that either we need to be on an email distribution list, or is there a website to go to? How do people know about, assuming there are programs going on, how do you learn about them?
Right. Well, oh, you want to sense? Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're in a bit of a transition as we've just changed over farmers. So we're gonna be doing things a little bit differently moving forward. But at the moment, yes, there is a website, Well-Fed Garden, and you can absolutely .org. Thank you. And then you can absolutely sign up for a newsletter there. There will be information posted on events both through the website as that comes up, and then also through Eventbrite. So those are both places to look. At the moment, we're here in March. We are just at the incipient stages of the farming coming to life. If you went 4 weeks ago, you'd really see nothing The farm doesn't look like much in January and February, but as it starts to come out, we'll have more programming coming up.
And also, we're still wrestling with what we're going to do going forward. It's currently Arthur and I are funding this, and it's money. It's a lot of money, and we're not sure exactly how we're proceeding. So we're just sort of looking. We're putting it out there and figuring it out.
Let me just also add one thing, Sid. In addition to programming, the garden is open. You can come by, check it out. There are some scheduled volunteer hours during the week, but it is a community resource for people.
Is it, by the way, is it wellfedgarden.org, .net, .com?
.org.
.org.
.org. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was, we did have lots of programming when it was part of the restaurant, because the kids that work there were employees of the restaurant, and the restaurant put on farm dinners and workshops. So it was a lot involved as part of the restaurant. And we're, figuring out what we're going to do as we move forward.
Who is the current farmer?
She's a lovely young lady who's recently moved here, Lilius Petit Scott. We did try to find a Jewish farmer, but we didn't. She's terrific, though. We love her.
Oh, she's got amazing background, not only in agriculture, but urban agriculture and sustainable agriculture. And she's really the exact right person to be the steward for this property right now.
And she's full-time?
She's full-time. She lives in the house with her husband. So she is there all the time.
So the house is habitable.
Yep.
This is the old house that was made habitable.
We made it habitable in 2012. One of our partners, Alan Hoffman, rebuilt the whole thing. It was pretty impressive. Yeah, it's a nice house. 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathrooms, new appliances.
That's adequate.
The other thing, I went on one of the GPS maps. I used Apple Map, but I suspect Google's the same. If you type in well-fed garden, it comes up and you can go, it'll give you the directions.
Okay, thank you.
If anybody wants to visit out there, you can find it that way as well.
Yeah, and if you go on the website, you'll see when the open volunteer times are. It's not anything that one needs to RSVP. You can just drop in. It's really a very community building culture of sharing.
Yep. Thank you, Bonnie. Connect@wellfedgarden.org and you'll reach Lilius. Connect@wellfedgarden.org. Yes. Great. So we have 5 minutes left, and I'm just going to do a very small learning. This isn't really a teaching that our kids would do at the garden, but it is a little learning for us today. That Passover is coming in less than a month. And to prepare, we clean our homes of chametz. And this commandment to clean our homes is the same requirement when planting our gardens. Farmers always wait until the spring to clean out their gardens from the previous year's plants. And they don't take out the old plants and seed pods and any of that before the springtime, because all of those are very important to the pollinating bees and beneficial insects. During the winter, they provide food, and the fallen leaves protect the insects, promotes the growth of microbes, and ultimately supports birds and other animals. So they need to be left in the garden during the winter months. But just as we clean our homes for Passover in the springtime, we clean our homes of unleavened bread, which is a spring cleaning, so we do in the garden. And of course, we know that Passover is when the Israelites left Egypt. They were slaves and they became free people. And the spring cleaning of Passover is also about freeing ourselves from the constraints of the wintertime. Farmers know that they need to spring clean their plots before planting the spring season seeds. They have to make way and provide a new home, cultivate the soil so it's nurturing for the new seeds. Undesirable plants that have grown during the winter months also need to be weeded out. And we do the same thing when we clean our houses before Passover and get rid of the chametz. And I'm sure you all know that chametz is leavened. It has that rising nature, and it is compared in the Kabbalah that rising symbolizes pride or arrogance. While eating matzah during Passover symbolizes, it's flat and we're more humble. And in a way, being connected to the soil and to the cycles of nature help us realize the reality of the humbleness, the position we're in. Thus, the process of getting rid of our chametz is not just about getting rid of the physical chametz, it's about getting rid of our spiritual chametz, the negativity we build up in our lives. And at Passover, we need to recognize that this spiritually limiting chametz and find new ways to embrace the positive and truly important parts of our lives. The Passover cleaning cycle mirrors the agricultural cycles of cleaning and preparing the land and planting new seeds. We need to make room for new plants, just as we need to make room for new attitudes and a new beginning at Passover. Passover is in the spring because it focuses on planting the seeds of positive thinking. And our Jewish path teaches us to maintain a well-conditioned mind, which is the same as tending a well-prepared garden.
Thank you. Two other questions I noticed in the chat. How do you handle the Shemitah year? Has that come up as a question or an issue?
Okay, well, the Shemitah year applies to the land of Israel. So it doesn't actually apply to any of the land outside of Israel. And it's only the ancient land. So even in Israel proper, there's parts of it that the Shemitah doesn't apply to for all those rule following Jews or Torah following. However, I've been studying the Shemitah, and it's a big part of the Jewish environmental movement talking about it. And in actual fact, from what I'm learning, is that the Shemitah was never actually followed because it's a big ask. But what it's about is, it's really about what Bonnie was speaking about, leaving the corners of our fields. It's about letting go of debts. So debtors are no longer, it's about equaling out our society. Of course, we're living in a time in which the income inequality is totally out of whack. We have 3 super rich people and 97 people who are struggling. So what the Shemitah year is about, it's really a struggling, this is my understanding, about equalizing that and not allowing this huge disparity to come about. Because when that happens, we have revolutions, we have right-wing fanatics or left-wing fanatics. We have people who are really hurting, who act out and destroy our society. And that's why Shemitah is about keeping everything in balance, which of course is the lesson that nature teaches us.
And just as an FYI, we are in the Shemitah year currently, 5782. So I never understood how this was fully played out in the ancient land, because if you're just not taking care of farming, agriculture, and husbandry, then I still don't fully understand how people were eating and making a living. So
is the Shemitah year the 7th year?
Yes.
I'm reading a book right now by Abraham Isaac Cook, who was the first chief rabbi of the Yeshuv, the land before it became Israel. And he actually arrived in Israel in 1904, so right at the very beginning of the return period. And of course, this was a big problem. They had all those guys who were in Jerusalem who had been there for a while, the really ultra-Orthodox. And they were literally living on the donations from Eastern Europe. And then there were these young Halutzim, the farmers. And they couldn't possibly not farm one year because they would starve.
Right.
So
We
he
also-
came up with his elaborate system of, you know, of all these legal rules in which they got permission to farm. You
My
know?
understanding is part of it's been a rotation, so you could have a seventh, at any point, 1/7 of the property is fallow, so it rotates through, so every piece of the farm gets to rest every 7 years, but certainly not a total shutdown in accordance with that Shemitah year exactly. There have been some, as Anya said, loopholes, ways to,
And there was, I know we're getting toward the end here. There's one other question posted in the chat. I don't know who Cullen Whitley is, but there was a question posted. Have you talked with Cullen Whitley?
Sure. Well, Cullen has started the Highland Church garden, community garden, and we know him in the urban agricultural community, and he's a real leader and inspiring leader, and
Is
he's
that
made a
the
huge
church-
difference.
Is that church
The
on Ridge Road at Lake Boone?
that church, and we all know, we drive by there, we see that garden, we feel good, right?
Right.
And it's been a real gathering point in their community. They support lots of refugees. And that's a direction that we might go with in the well-fed garden.
Have we spoken with him?
Well, I know him. I meet him all the time.
Yeah.
I've also spoken with him because I went into the garden one time, and he's a very welcoming person and very thoughtful. And his big concern was that at one point there was discussion about turning it into a parking lot, that area, for the church. And but it did bring in a lot of people that were in the community, and a lot of Asians that were settling in the area were coming there. And if they put 10 hours in, I don't know the exact, it wasn't, I may have been 10 hours a week, or then they were able to take the bounties from the garden, but it wasn't an unreasonable amount of time. But he was connected to NC State. I've forgotten. I think he was on faculty there, and he made that whole thing go right from the beginning. Very, very interesting, thoughtful, kind man.
And I take it he's a member of that church as well as all of this work?
Yes.
Yeah. It is I've been there. I mean, I've seen that garden. And I'm aware of a lot of work that church does with refugees and others in the community. They have a lot of interesting programs.
I think you can feel free to stop at that garden anytime you want and just walk around. If nothing else, there may be someone there that can tell you more about it and what they plan. They've used bamboo really well for there, and they harvest it themselves.
Got it. Well, I know it's 5 minutes after 12, so I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. Very much appreciated. If there are any questions remaining, or if Anya or Bonnie, if you have a few more minutes, if somebody has a question, I don't want to cut everything off, but for those that maybe either have other programs or need to leave, I just want to thank everybody. I know I learned a lot more about the garden than I had previously known, and I think it's very interesting and dynamic to see what other communities, when you showed those 12 different communities and the different connections they have to either federations or to schools, just very interesting. And thank you also, Bonnie. Again, I had no idea where things stand today in terms of this. I knew of the existence of the garden, but to both Anya and Bonnie, it's very exciting what the potential is here for the future of this garden and what it could mean to the community.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for the opportunity, and it's great to see everybody.
Wonderful to see you and Arthur again.
Thank you for the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.